everyone for joining us today. So we're going to move into the panel discussion that will hopefully get into a little bit more detail about what a winning partnership could look like and what our panelists see as the potential opportunities there. In order to save time and make the most of the experts that we have with us, we're not going to run through, I won't speak to everybody's extensive experience and biographies. The information is provided for you already. But what I'll do is invite the panelists to speak for no more than 5 minutes about where they see the particular kind of opportunities, but also what they may think is needed. We've talked about the mobility of professional talent, but also other financial, structural, or cultural things that may be needed in order to optimize collaboration. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker. If you could introduce yourself, say who you work for, and then what your insight into what's possible.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sudhir, Dole, CEO of ICICI Bank UK PLC. So I'll be talking a bit about, I think Dr. called, we have a lot of statistics on the flows between the two countries. I thought I'll just give you a bit of flavor on the nature of these flows and how they have changed before the financial crisis and now post-financial crisis. So if you look at before the financial crisis, between the period 2003 to 2008, we saw a large number of acquisitions. For example, Tata's acquisitions of JLR, Chorus, and other large deals. ICICI Group, we ourselves invested 400 million into our UK subsidiary to assist Indian companies. The trend has become much more diversified if you look at the scenario post the financial crisis. Now we see SMEs, mid-corporates and large corporates. For example, if you see the top 60 fastest growing Indian companies in the UK, we observe that 30 of them are SMEs, 25 are mid-corporates, and 5 are large corporates. So that's a significant change. If you look at the sectors, also it's changing. So now the focus is technology, financial services has also grown well. And if you see the kind of sectors that they are investing in, it could be high-end research, whether it's technology, pharma, or automobile. We are seeing investments in fintech. Some Indian companies have started investing large numbers in the fintech sector here. And real estate is another area where we are seeing both Indian corporates invest as well as Indian individuals starting to invest. So I think these are some flow changes which have occurred. And as the client focus has changed also and the client profile has changed, we see that even in the banking sector, the kind of products that we provide as ICICI have also changed. So just to give you an idea, earlier we used to be funding these large M&A deals. But today we are seeing that when the SMEs come to the UK, we are quite happy to open their simple current accounts because we find also that the high street banks don't want these customers. And we obviously are very keen to have these customers. So I think that's a difference which we are seeing. The other thing is we are seeing that they want to cover their foreign exchange exposures. So they are trying to hedge themselves, and we have now got a product which is an online offering using fintech again. We have started funding against property, against rentals. So this is again something which we are doing. Other thing which we see is that Indian employees want to shift here, especially in the tech field. Come here, they want to open an account, they struggle to open a bank account. So what we did recently was we have launched a video KYC where a person sitting in India can open his account before he leaves the shores of India. So he'll have everything ready by the time he lands here. So these are changes which we have done. So that comes to the question, I think, as to why do these companies invest in the UK? And of course, we have talked about the historical links, we have talked about the English language, the rule of law, taxation. All these are known. A few points which I came across from Ernst & Young, which I think are very interesting, is that the UK ranks the lowest in the G7 for the cost of establishing a business. And the short time to set up a company here is just 13 days compared to the European average of 32. The UK also has the lowest industrial labor costs, the most flexibility in wage determination across Europe, and the UK, of course, has a very low tax rate of just 20%. Further, if you look at Indian companies specifically, given the kind of arrangements that the UK has from the tax perspective, many Indian companies are using UK as a global headquarters. And of course, as a location to raise finance, what we have seen is that masala bonds have been raised here. So Indian companies are finding it as an attractive jurisdiction both for raising debt as well as equity. On Brexit specifically, I think the points have been covered largely. I think whether Indian companies come here depends upon what kind of a trade deal that the UK has with Europe, what kind of trade deal UK has with the rest of the world, and of course a key aspect which we have just discussed is the whole point of immigration for Indian professionals and Indian students, and what will happen then.
Sudhir, thanks for sharing what's possible from the Indian side coming into the UK. Chris, perhaps we could look at the other way. What do you think of the opportunity?
Look, I'll say a few quick introductory words, and then perhaps in the Q&A I'll cover some of those other things. So my name's Chris Parsons. I chair the India practice of a big global law firm. I've been extremely fortunate in that the last 12 years I've been focused on India, and India's been incredibly kind to me. It's been unquestionably, in my 33 years, the most rewarding part of my career. And I spend 2 weeks every month in India, all across India. So Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Pune, Ahmedabad, Calcutta, Ranchi, Sivakasi, all over. And probably my only real claim to fame is that in 2015, I thought it would be a good idea to celebrate my 30th anniversary at Herbert Smith, now Herbert Smith Freehills, to walk, slightly wrong, but maybe walk, from Mumbai, which is sort of about there, from the gateway of India, down through Maharashtra, along the coast. The coastline is just fantastic. Down through Goa. Goa's short, thankfully. Full, interestingly, of people about my age who, when they were at 18, had never left. So I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. Down through Karnataka to Mangalore, where I can recommend there was a squid dish in a very spicy sauce, which is just exquisite, which I had 4 times. And I turned left at Mangalore, went over the Western Ghats, through the coffee plantations to Bangalore. So it was 30 marathons in 30 days. That's my only claim to fame. I am unquestionably a complete India-phile, so most of what I'm going to say today is going to be very pro-Indian. So that's a sort of warning at the outset. All right, and I'm so pleased to see so many ethnic Indians in the audience. I feel very much at home. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Suchit, did you want to talk through what your insights are?
Sure, indeed, yeah. My journey kind of started, if you look at the map, there 22 years ago. I jumped on a plane, got here, and started talking about investing in India in '95. I had full hair and French beard then, so you know where I've got to with that. So I think over the last few years, we've seen increasing stakeholder engagement, and while speaking to the High Commissioner, there's a valid point that I think it has got to be highlighted, which is there's a lot of good things happening in India, but somehow the mainstream UK media doesn't seem to want to present it in that way. And that's, I think, one of the points I want to throw out into the forum today. Other than that, as an investment firm, we are a firm that supports what I call mainstream impact investment. And this is an increasingly new thought process or school of thought in the investment world. And it's all about investing in projects that deliver measurable environmental and social impact at the same time give a market rate return. But that's not about tree hugging or a bore well in the middle of Madhya Pradesh. This Tesla is a good example to give you as a mainstream impact investment candidate. There is a systemic change happening in the way we're going to lead our lives. And what we see in that map there is probably the single biggest urbanization in the history of mankind. So we have 700 million people moving from the countryside into cities, and that's going to bring with it a whole raft of carbon and environmental related issues. And with the topic being 2030, I think in terms of what we have to achieve over the next coming years, in that we need to look at sustainable wealth creation. We're all here in one capacity or the other because we've excelled and we've moved from one economy to the other, and we are delivering balance sheets, or we are part of a team that delivers balance sheets, but we have to be conscious about what the carbon footprint is. And impact investments, summarized in a nutshell, is nothing but long-term sustainable capitalism. We all know about what happened in 2008 and beyond. And in this topic, and what I find very engaging is about what can we do, and we include both India and UK, to ensure that we are two pillars towards mitigating the environmental impact of all that what we want to do. So that's one of the topics I like to throw in and to discuss. But otherwise, very delighted, Dr. Cole, for having us here as a strategic partner to IPF. I'm looking forward to engaging with the professionals here. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Doug, if we could give you the final word in terms of what you think the potential is between the UK-India relationship.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Cole, for the invitation. You've mentioned us already in the work that we have done to assess where India stands in the World Economic League table. Of course, there isn't such a thing as the World Economic League table. It's purely a construct which fits with our passion for sports and things like that, and therefore puts things in particular orders. But actually, it doesn't matter as much as most people think. I'll say a few words about that. I'll say a few words about India's unique model for economic development, because economists are people who tell you that what works in practice doesn't work in theory. And India's model for economic development is a perfect example, proving that we economists have got our theory wrong, and the Indians have managed to get the practice right. I'll say one or two things about India's economy changing gear, which is what is happening at the moment. The High Commissioner referred to some of the issues there, and he referred to some of the things that people have thought of as downsides. But there are big upsides to be looked at as well, and it's important we understand those. And then finally, this is a little bit more frivolous, but at some point, India is going to be the largest economy in the world. And what is it going to be like when India rules the world? Well, India already rules the world in one area of activity, which is cricket. So let's just see what if we go from the IPL and cricket and so on, let's see what that means for when India rules the world. Okay. First of all, in terms of numbers, in 2019, the last World Economic League table, which we produce in conjunction with our friends Global Construction Perspectives, Graham Robertson over there, it said in 2019, India overtakes France and Britain in cash terms to become the world's 5th largest economy. But as Vince Cable pointed out earlier, in purchasing power terms, India is already the 3rd largest economy in the world, 3 times bigger than Britain. India's economy in purchasing power parity terms is $9 trillion, whereas Britain's is only $3 trillion. So bear in mind, we're already there. 2022, India's population overtakes that of China, and India becomes the most populous country in the world. So we are talking about an immensely important country that will certainly at some point probably not in the lifetime of many of us, at least not mine, but in the lifetime of some of us, will become the largest economy and the most important economy in the whole world. That is important. The model for economic development that we used to see for most of East Asia, if you go from countries like, start with Japan, go through Korea, go through Singapore, go to China, is essentially the government probably overinvests in infrastructure, and the private sector goes into export-led growth, and the export-led growth starts low-tech and then moves up the technology spectrum. India has done it entirely the opposite way. Other than education, on the whole, the governments in the past have, if anything, held back economic growth. And meanwhile, the private sector has just decided to start at the top and go to the highest level of technology possible and develop through software skills. I used to be on the main board of Marconi, as well as the team who was brought in to try and rescue the company. And at one point we were thinking of merging with Huawei, the Chinese technology company. And the boards got quite close. And we asked Huawei how they got their software. And they said, oh, we do the same as everyone else. We get all our software from India. And that's the Chinese. So that's an indication of starting at the top. But this is all changing gear right now, because we have, first of all, the teething problems that come in with demonetisation and the introduction of the GST, but we also have the most amazing infrastructure investment plans. Essentially, for the rest of this century, there are two big worldwide construction projects. One is the infrastructure and development of India, and the other is the Chinese Silk Road Silk Belt. And these two will define our century. For example, the Indian Ministry of Finance, 3 weeks ago, announced the building of 83,000 kilometres of roads. Now, just to put that in context, the whole British motorway system is just 3,000 kilometres of roads. So 83 is quite a lot, as opposed to 3. That's a huge change. And of course, the advantage of coming into the infrastructure now is you can skip a few levels of technology. And what we're seeing is the very top levels of technology coming in. So that means that this is something that's going to be quite dramatic, and we're working on a report, again with our partners, Global Construction Perspective, to look at the construction opportunities for 2030. Now let me just finish with when India rules the world. I happened to be at Lord's on that day in 1983, and my mother, who was sitting there, was the only one of us who at half-time said India will win. The rest of us were convinced the West Indies would win, and we were wrong. But that's forecasting for you. My mother said, no, I think the Indians will win. And guess what? She was right. And of course, India has been fascinated with one-day cricket since. 50% of all the revenues in cricket anywhere come from the IPL. And so India now rules the world in cricket. And what does that mean for the way India rules the world? Well, it will be dynamic, it will be commercial, it will be brash, it'll probably make a few mistakes. There might be a bit of chaos as well, occasionally. But I think it will be a very exciting world to live in. So, fasten your seatbelts and look out for an exciting ride.
Real-life examples, and then we can open it out to the audience.
I think the partnership clearly I see is, I think, in the area of research. And if you look at the educational institutions that the UK has, I think there are still institutions which have got a certain amount of amount, there's Cambridge, Oxford, LSE. And these are the institutions which have an opportunity to play a bigger role partnering with India. And I think we have seen companies recently, in the last 6 months, we saw Mahindra investing in the auto sector in research. Before that, we saw Pyramids invest in research. So I think it's an important area where they can make it more conducive. And they need to find a way, the UK needs to find a way to compete with the US, because obviously the US is the alternative where people go to, and US universities are alternative where people go to. So I think, but this could be a big area.
And Chris, what do you think?
My position is, I think that this may not be very popular with the British, but I think the UK has got much more to gain from India than the other way around, in short, not least given against the extraordinary statistics. I listened to Deepak Parekh speak at an event recently, and he said that India, and this is relevant very much to this audience, India has done 3 extraordinary things already in terms of just absolute headline stuff. The first one he said was around IT information, so the emphasis, the Wipros, the TCSs of this world and things. So that really follows the point that my friend here has made. The second one was around the pharma industry, the generic pharma industry, which has been extraordinarily successful. And the third one around the Indian diaspora and what people have referred to as that living bridge, whether it's money being sent back, but that continual relationship. And I think that will be and continue to be incredibly important, actually. And I'd love to see more of that. And what was interesting, he said that he thought that history would suggest that a fourth thing would be added to that list of 3. And in his view, that was Prime Minister Modi. And that was actually, and I listened to him, this was at least 12 months ago, and I think actually, if anything, he would make that point even more powerful now, because what he has done, I think the point was made that in this country, perhaps the headlines have not been quite as positive or as many. But on the basis that I spend most of the time in India, and most of the time sort of observing things in India, some of the things that the government have done have been absolutely, and I think the word was used, revolutionary. Things that no other governments have done in history. So demonetisation sounds like rather a sort of boring economist term, but it was quite the most extraordinary thing that could have ever have happened. In fact, Martin Wolf said, that Martin Wolf of FT fame said, he had never seen it done in relation to a country that was functioning perfectly well. He'd seen it done in relation to a war situation, he'd seen it done in relation to a country that was about to go bust, but never had he seen the economic experiment of saying in relation to a country where 90% of all transactions are undertaken by cash, I'm going to take 86% of that cash out of the economy on 4 hours' notice. It's absolutely extraordinary. And whilst the economic effect of that, I think the jury's still out. I think actually, on balance, it will all come good. But actually, the sort of behavioural and political effects of it are very, very significant. And what you're hearing, certainly around amongst the sort of middle class and the rural people in India, and I can't do it in Hindi, and I wish I could do it in Hindi, but it was basically, you know, I've lost a goat, but the rich man has lost a cow. And so, whilst they've suffered some pain, they see that issues around corruption, lack of transparency, and all the rest of it has been addressed in a really extraordinary way. And I think that bodes incredibly well for India. So what is, at a very simplistic level, my vision is that I don't think we can wait for free trade agreements, economic trade agreements, and all the rest of it. I think we here in the UK need to roll our sleeves up, and despite some of the challenges, we need to go out there and make a success of it. And my experience is that if you're willing to go to India and really adopt India as your own and make it really significant and important part of you, Indians will be incredibly supportive of you and will help you to succeed. So that's my message. We need to get out there and roll our sleeves up.
Suchit, I was really struck by the idea of impact investment. So, you know, where do you...
Entrepreneur and then going back into cities like Bangalore. I've also met entrepreneurs who are British origin, not Indian, who have taken a flight into Mumbai and set up with the local UK trade support. So that speaks volumes about how today UK can go into India without an Indian partner. I'm probably underselling myself here, but in the early 90s you needed an Indian to do business on the ground, but not today. I think that speaks volumes of all the structural changes coming about. But I think tech is definitely going to lead, and when we say tech, the mainstay at the moment is about millions of Indians coding and exporting software into, I think that's going to turn the other way, where we're going to see a lot of high-end tech going into India, Indianized, if I could use that word, and then being applied locally. And we as a firm are constantly looking for any tech that will go towards mitigating the carbon footprint of any operation. So all of us who've turned up here for this discussion and debate, we have created a carbon footprint. And it's about constantly thinking about that and how we can mitigate that. It's PwC has started what they call circular economy. So they used to bin all their old laptops, now they refurbish and they sell it on. And that division alone last year made $500,000 profit and created about 40 employment. So it's about bringing the thought process into the mindset. And the projects we identify and do in India, we find that there's a lot of high-end tech that has been coming out of the UK going into India, which is all an exciting space to be in.
Excellent. And Doug, just your thoughts on where you think are other, perhaps things that we haven't heard so far, other areas potential innovation between the two countries?
Well, like Chris, I think that Britain probably has more to gain than India, to be frank. India will succeed and be successful whether we in Britain get involved or not. It will be a bit better if we get involved, but I don't want to pretend that we are the swing factor as far as the India economy is concerned. We are not. However, we can help in certain ways, and hopefully we can build on, as Vince says, it's best to move away from the history and build on the relationships that we have at present. My office, we started life at the same time in the same place as Cobra Beer, and I've single-handedly tried to keep Cobra Beer afloat by consuming the product. Now, I know Cobra Beer is not made in India, but it was designed by an Indian gentleman who was a Cambridge biochemist who was being paid research money for biochemistry research, and he used that to test the beers that went best with curry. And having done a lot of extensive research in this, he developed Cobra Beer, and he's been a great success in that ever since. So there are all sorts of different ways in which the mix of skills. Construction is going to be critical, and because we're jumping so many levels of technology in construction, that is going to be important. And so Vince mentioned that the British government had been rather poo-pooing the idea of some way of multiple access, massive access for professional migration. That is mad. If the Brits want to keep some of the most skilled people in the world out of Britain, why the hell would we want to do it? We'd be just silly to do that. The partnership we want to have is a partnership that enables skilled people to be able to travel freely, and we need to work hard to create that. And if the government's against it, we need to change the government's mind.
So on that note, I think perhaps best if we open out to questions from the audience. If you could wait for the microphone and say your name and who you work for, who you're representing before you say your question. So are there any questions from the audience? We'll take a few at a time. So you have the lady here and somebody here and then there. So if we take those three questions first, perhaps if we take them and then you can answer.
Hi, my name is Kamalorti, an ex-banker, now moving to the social agenda really. Can I just ask a question? I mean, we're picturing India's population growth. We're picturing the migration of people moving from rural to the cities and the sustainability, that sort of course. I know we're talking about IT and we're talking about investment, but I would be interested in understanding how can we make, I've got a soft spot in Punjab, I come from Punjab, is how that land is eventually going to become where people want to go back and do the farming so they can feed those mouths that we're talking about. And could there be possibly a partnership with England and with the UK here, with farming? Is there something that we can help migrate? Because at the moment, the stories I'm hearing in Punjab are very, very distressing.
Okay, thank you. And then there was two questions here. So yourself?
Hi, I'm Arjay Babu, the director of PwC's Asset and Wealth Management practice. One of the sobering lessons from Brexit and the election in the US was inequality is not just an emerging markets problem. It can cause issues in the developed world, as in the UK. There's a lot of focus on ESG investments and asset management, and disproportionately towards the environment and carbon footprint. Do you think there is an opportunity, rather than imperative, for UK and India to collaborate on addressing income inequality and getting the asset management industry closely involved there?
Thank you. And
I've got only two questions to ask. One from Mr. Sudhir about demonetization. What has happened with that, whether it was good or not, because the bankers in India, they have of course made a lot of money out of it. And I don't know. And then second to Suchit. Suchit, you are saying about urbanization, 700 million people would be traveling. Is India ready for that? It is not, because there has been no pre-planning by the government of India, by the state governments, and at the lower level, at the municipal level. I have been to India last month only, for 1 month, and I see from my own eyes that how the highways are in a sad state. Within a couple of years, they were built, and within 2 years you find that there are potholes on the highways. And this is the thing which I feel where India is going wrong is misgovernance. And that misgovernance is not only at the central level, but at the state level and at the municipal level. That's all.
Thank you. Why don't we take the question around farming and addressing income inequalities as being important in terms of ensuring social cohesion, and then we can take the specific questions for Sudhir and Suchit. So let's start with the farming question. Did anybody want to respond?
Well, I mean, my initial reaction is Punjab does have issues with drugs. The biggest problem on the ground is that. I think that's what the government needs to address. It is still one of the biggest producers of grains, and we all know about the Green Revolution. I think the way that the farming would go in India would be more along the US style of large tracts of land and commercial farming. That's what it needs to get to. But it's a very political and sensitive subject. We know the largest vote bank comes from the poor and the farmers. So how that would evolve is definitely a big debate and no question to discuss. But I think I'm an eternal optimist. So what I've seen over the last 20 odd years is that whether we like it or not, India is this big tanker that is floating in one direction. No one person, be it Modi or any other person, can turn it. It will take its own time to turn, and what we need to apply is patience. And there are several social programs that are being introduced into Punjab that I'm aware of through the Prince's Trust from here. There's a Punjabi's funding through Prince's Trust, which is doing phenomenal work on the ground, including bringing in new ways to reduce the consumption of water in farming. Because I think if there is ever a World War III, that's going to be over water. That's where it's heading. So I think there's great opportunities for biotech and I should call it agro-tech firms to go into places like Punjab to do farming. I don't know whether that answers the question or not.
Anybody else want to respond?
Well, I'm not sure I'm qualified really to talk about farming. I will mention just a couple of things, if I may. I was in Patel recently, teaching at a national law school there. It was absolutely fantastic. And I was also in Amritsar speaking at a Tata conference, which was my first visit to Amritsar, so, and also my first visit to Punjab, so I was very, very happy to be there. It was wonderful. Look, you raise a very, very sort of big philosophical question. And it was very interesting. So I was, a couple of years ago, I went to some villages outside Ranchi to see the work of a number of NGOs around supporting villages and helping them with issues around education, around health, around sustainability, around irrigation, around soil analysis, and the sorts of plants they should grow. And I have to say, and shortly after that, and the charity was run by a company that I got to know reasonably well in Calcutta, Usha Martin, and they then took me to their factory, and the factory was fantastic actually, and they adopted a number of processes to help with efficiency and all the rest of it. But I was very, very struck by the thought of, you know, what life would I prefer? Would I prefer to be working in that factory, or would I prefer to be working in that village in a state that actually was then much more productive and things? So you raise a very big sort of political point. I did just, if I may, very quickly want to raise a point that I
be very quick.
Okay, then I won't. Then I won't. Okay, then I won't. No, I may come.
No, I feel terrible now.
No, you don't need to. You don't need to. That's fine.
Can I respond about income inequality, because that's my next book is The Inequality Paradox, which looks at this. And I'm not going to cover all the issues because there isn't time. But I think the area where there is scope for collaboration is that one of the challenges of our time is going to be the regulation of big multinationals, particularly in the banking and tech sphere, where they may have excessive power. They will have too much power to be regulated just by one government. And that's an area where I believe that it's critically important that countries like India, Britain to a certain extent, although we're not such big players in this game, United States, Europe, China, we need to get together and find a way of making sure that the public interest is served as well as the corporate interest of these corporates. Now, easier said than done, and I can see the politicians there shaking their heads slightly. I understand that because it is a politically complicated thing to do. But it has to be done. Otherwise, our future isn't going to be a great one.
And then perhaps if you could answer the impact of demonetization.
Sure. So I think let's look at, before we look at the impact, I think we should look at what are the goals of demonetization. And I think one goal clearly was to move money from the informal channels and bring it into the formal economy. And the second was, of course, in a way, the spin-off benefit, which was weeding out corruption, which is there. If you look at the first objective, I think a huge amount of money has flown in from the informal sector to the formal sector. Number of transactions which the wallets trade, number of transactions which came into the banking sector is huge. Overall, if you see, the Reserve Bank of India has brought down the interest rates by about 200 basis points in the last 2 years. So you have a multiplier benefit because the interest rates are coming down. It helps not only the banks, of course it helps the banks, but it also helps industry at the end of the day. And what's also happened because of the huge money which is now lying in the banks, that money has partly gone into the mutual funds. The mutual funds has meant that people have started investing in the equity markets. The equity markets are going to fill up, which means in turn that it ignites the animal spirits, and you see investments coming back into the economy. So there is overall very, very positive impact because of demonetization. Has there been short-term supply shocks? Yes, there has been. Obviously, like we were discussing earlier, it's not an easy thing to do, and it's never been done before. So there were certain supply shocks. You could not have visualized all the things which had to be done. But if you look at the full big picture, I think it's brought down interest costs, it's converted the informal economy into the formal economy, and it will result in spurring investments and will give a fillip to growth in the long term. Already we are seeing, when we talk to our clients, the short-term disruption which was there with our corporate clients, they don't have that problem anymore. They say now things are fine. So you might have had the problem for 2-3 months. In Punjab, people had, in Surat, some of my clients had. But now they're saying, things are fine, everything is back to normal, and it's no more a problem. So that's why I would say it as a success from the long-term perspective. And even Moody's has recognized that.
And then, Suchit, the final question, it's a big question, is India ready for rapid urbanization?
Well, I think the answer is it isn't, but you can't stop it. The fact that people are going to move from countryside to cities is a natural phenomenon because economics attracts that movement of the population. And I keep going back to the point about how if we are looking at India, one needs to stop looking at a snapshot event of, and again I read it in the media about demonetization or any of the structural steps taken by this current government. One should look at it as what are the impact, again in this context, of over a decade or two. And I agree there are problems in terms of the infrastructure, but it is all work in progress. So to give you an example, we have referring to Doug's point about construction, we've taken a new technology, well it's not new to India, but it's an established construction technology here. It reduces the footprint, it reduces the consumption of water. It's India's first off-site modular construction factory. Now, from Pune, where I live, half of the to the factory site, when I went there in 2010 with my British expat team, it took us 4 hours and 10 minutes. Today, that journey is covered in 1 hour and 50 minutes. It was an old 1-lane, single-lane highway. Today, it's just a 3-lane highway built by the Japanese funding. So one needs to be able to have the vision to say that things are moving forward. There will still be problems. I mean, we're talking about 1.4 billion and all that comes with it. None of the Western administrative systems have ever dealt with this sort of a population. So if you look at an average bureaucrat in India, the number of files he's got to go through, and an average bureaucrat here who's got to go through, you know, there's chalk and cheese in terms of numbers. If you look at judiciary, an average Supreme Court judge, I was told, has got to look in excess of 100 files a week, while an average judge here does about 100 files in a year. So, you know, that's the volume difference that we're talking about. So I think the big point here is that we should avoid the mistake of saying, well, this is how it's worked in the UK, let's take it exactly as it is and take it and dump it in India. It's never going to happen. So that's I think, the key message. So if we see potholes getting fixed here by a local authority, we do have a pothole crisis, or there was, you know, so then that's a small, focused, singular approach being done by a very efficient system. You can't apply that to, say, the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. That's a totally different beast altogether, and we need to appreciate that.
Okay. I'm conscious that we're eating it. So we have somebody at the back, a gentleman here at the front, and yourself, and we'll finish with those 3 questions.
I'm Yashowardhan, and I work here for the financial sector. I've got a couple of questions.
Could we, because of time, is it possible to have one burning question?
Okay, and maybe probably a short one. The first one being that today we have seen Philip Hammond, our Chancellor, presenting the budget and the forecast for UK growth and GDP, right? For the next 3 years, he is clearly shown it's all going to the ground, down, it's going to decrease. On the other hand, for India, we know the growth outlook and GDP for the next few years on the increasing trend, right? Also, we have seen this year Moody's has decreased like the UK's credit rating this year, and just last week they have increased for India, right? My question is, okay, considering this scenario, how would UK be in a negotiating position if they have to negotiate some trade deals after the Brexit thing is over with India? Number 2.
We need to move on to the other. But I admire your confidence.
Why I want to ask this question, because this is not for the panel over there. This is more for His Excellency, Mr. Sinha. Just a quick one. So yesterday we have seen like India and UK, they were fighting for one seat at the International Court of Justice, right? And which was not looking good at the international stage. But just asking him that why were not any diplomatic efforts which were made before that, right? Because India and UK obviously they always showcase each other as the strong partners. Why it was not done in this case?
Okay, thank you. And then there was something here.
A couple of points, other one point.
Rolled into 2.
In the 80 years before
Sorry,
independence,
could you say your name?
Prabhakar Kaza.
And if you could use the microphone.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought I didn't need it. In 80 years before independence, 50 million people died in India. We were all brought up on PL 480. The present situation in India is that India has got food for 1 full year. I don't know why it got skipped out, this particular point. The Food Corporation of India holds food for all the Indians for 1 full year. A major achievement. Another major achievement of India which got lost out is aerospace achievement. In one single rocket, India had about 104 satellites for the whole world, not just for India. And when we talk about India now refuses charity, by the way, taking stance of India. My question is, for the last 10 years, UK has been trying to negotiate on Scotch. That we should reduce, that India should reduce the tariff for it from 140% to 0% or 10 or 20, reasonable amount. Every year, one delegation goes from India to from UK to India. That's it.
Yeah.
When do you think this fast will end?
Thank you.
Even Meneses, he's also professional.
No. And we have one final
Deepak Lalwani from London Camp, and it is a brief question and one question. And specifically to Sudhir and Chris, it's on the sentiment from the ground in India towards Britain post-Brexit. And what I'm asking for is not the official sound bites that we get on television and the papers. We are aware of that. I'm asking for the private dinner parties, informal discussions, if you're privy to them, Just a broad idea, I know it's some time away, but just a flavor of what's going on at the moment.
Okay,
Thank you.
So I feel like we should end with Scotch. So maybe if we start off with, given that the forecasts that have come out today after the budget and reduced growth and GDP growth, what do you think about the UK's trading position with India now? Is it weakened, or is it still a strong potential partner?
I don't think Britain is in a hugely strong negotiating position at the moment, but I think that we have various things to offer. We have a way of doing things which is remarkably internationally accepted. We have Scotch, of course, which is the world's most magnificent drink, and it is so special that we cannot quite understand why people don't want to drink more of it. And it should be encouraged. It is a very special thing. It comes from my native land in Scotland, and it is such a special thing that it would be a huge advantage. It would make trade negotiations so much better if we could all together consume Scotch whisky at the same time. I think that would really transform the negotiating atmosphere. So that is my recommendation.
Thank you. I like how you covered up both questions in your response. In terms of sentiment that you're hearing from the ground, so not the official soundbites, what are you hearing from people on the ground in terms of how they see Brexit within India?
Me too. Yeah, look, they're disappointed. They're disappointed that we've done it. I'm disappointed we've done it. Yeah, look, they're saddened by it. I don't think we should, in any way, any of us, including the British now, get fixated on some new trade agreement in the future. We need to get on with trade now. We need to get on with business now. To hang on to some, panacea, and so that would be my recommendation. Talking at a very personal level, we recruit brilliant lawyers, graduates from Indian law schools, and they're some of the cleverest lawyers we've got within our organisation. We currently have 31 lawyers in London who did their undergraduate degrees in India, and they are absolutely thriving. So as to the point on visas and things, I desperately hope that the governments will see sense. Our government will see sense, and allow more Indians come to the country.
I think when it comes to the topic of visas, I think we need to also look at the reverse perspective. All of the pressure about Indians wanting to get the visas. I think if you look in the 2030 context, my view is that it's going to be the other way. I think that the Indian High Commission rejecting visas, people wanting to go in there. I mean, that's the reality. We need to look at, that's also a reality that is coming through. So I think the old dictum of saying, I definitely grew up in an India where if you're not successful unless you've landed in the US or the UK. That's sure enough why I jumped on a plane. But when I talk to my young nephews and nieces, there isn't the charm about the US and the UK. They've got pretty much everything happening there. The real estate sectors have delivered all the shopping malls. The automobile industry is coming with all the fancy cars. So everything we used to see in the 80s and the Hollywood movies, which was probably why we all ran into just to this place, that's all going to change now. So I think the reality also, and in terms of foreign policy, etc., I think the UK establishment should realize the fact that there is a big ship that is just about to leave. And with the fact that they are decoupling from Europe, the ship that they need to be on is on India. But there is still, I think, a fair bit of colonial hangover in terms of how the establishment approaches India and the Indian policies. And that needs to change, otherwise, soon enough, UK will totally become irrelevant to India. Totally is qualified.
Thank you. And then the last burning question of the evening, how soon will the fast end? The Scotch fast.
Well, I like Glenfiddich. That's what I say.
If we may give His Excellency an opportunity to respond, you'll need a microphone.
I think it's to the Scotch. Do you want it to the Scotch?
To the Scotch, but also I believe there was a question.
No, there was a question directed at me, but I'll rather answer the Scotch first.
Would you like
we're all lovers of Scotch whisky, so, but the best ambassador that you have for Scotch whisky is the Foreign Secretary. He goes around talking about reducing the duty, and a couple of occasions that I've been present, I have said tongue-in-cheek that I completely support him, because when I retire, which will be very soon, I won't have access to bonded stores in diplomatic duty-free, so I'd be very happy if this can be introduced. But seriously, on the other question, which the ICJ, the 3 words I didn't, or 3 acronyms I didn't want to use, letters that I've avoided the last 2 days that I've been in London, but I think I can't avoid it now. I think in terms of cooperation, the broader picture, multilateral, India and UK are doing a lot together. As it happened, we didn't predict, neither side could, that we'd face off against each other. Yeah. Remember that we were supposed to compete against Lebanon and they'd gotten earlier, and the UK should have gotten to the European seat, but then in the end, we were competing against each other. And it was a very tough battle. And I don't want to go into details, the media has written about it, but I think the statement made by the UK PR permanent representative ambassador in New York was wonderful. And I think even what the Foreign Secretary said in Parliament yesterday was magnanimous. So I think the bilateral relationship is not going to be affected at all by this sort of thing. It was an election. In an election, someone wins, somebody loses. So I think we should look at it that way. As far as coordination, we had enough coordination in the past. On this election in particular, I myself have raised this thing about reciprocal support to each other's candidates, not realizing that we'll be facing off. So these things are impossible to predict, and they will have no impact, even in the short term, on our very strong and robust relationship.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all then. If you join me in thanking our panelists. Hand over to Dinesh Patnaik, I think, in order to close the event, or no or not? Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Champa, for a fantastic panel discussion with all Sudhir, Chris, Suchit, Doug, and I think there was a lot of joy, excitement on that. When a few years ago, I was told that India consumes more Scotch than is produced in Scotland. But anyway, we are all united for getting the Scotch taxes down. But thank you, all of you, for coming. This is the first inaugural event, and I think a lot of it was talked about the issues that may be the major issues that following us. And High Commissioner, you identified some of them, but many of the tech industry is represented here. And as you mentioned and Vince mentioned, we will be taking some of these issues in terms of post-Brexit or no Brexit, or issues of how to continue to make this like a Silicon Valley place where both countries can work, and therefore what is involved in free flow of technology skills in the country. The other issues will also, we will try to have a dialogue with political parties on some of these issues, and among ourselves professionally. I want to thank you very much for coming here, and I want to thank Vince in coming. And I would also, there are a lot of professionals who are there, but want to recognize Lord Guardian, Lord Dole, and Mr. Virendra Sharma. We introduced you before you came. So thanks for the political support that we try to get to this, this initiative. And it's only your support that will sort of take it forward. We intend to have a series of events, some in Chatham House and some others. And this could not have been possible without the support primarily for the High Commission and with Dinesh Patnaik sort of working with the steering committee group to see that it happens. So number of the steering committee members are here. We'll meet probably at the cocktail. And this was something we discussed, but it was in the High Commission that we got that spark, and we're here. Therefore, thank you very much. Again, thank you, Chatham House, for the support that you've given. And it is really a great thing for us to have started our inaugural sport with the Chatham House colleagues that we worked with. And it's a joint, this event was jointly organized from Chatham House. And we could not have done it without the support of the ICICI Bank. Thank you very much. And Suchit, the fund that he was talking about, the Red Ribbon Asset Management Fund. So thank you, and for all the support to make this happen. And we hope that all of you will join as members, and we'll take it from this level to a much, much greater level for UK, India, and the role diaspora will play in UK, as well as in contributing to the development in India. So thank you very much. So please join us upstairs for the cocktails and some canapes, and we will have time for networking over there. Thank you.